We're going to be studying the book of Judges. And one of the reasons we're doing this, we looked at this, and there's almost never a series done on Judges. I haven't found an entire series that was done on Judges. And so a good idea, bad idea, we thought, let's tackle this. There's got to be some good stuff in the book of Judges. So we're going to be looking at the book of Judges. We're going to start in Judges 2, if you want to flip there. The title of this series is Sticks, Stones, and Jawbones. And the reason for that is because throughout the book of Judges, in all of the stories, there's some little element, like a stick or like a millstone, a jawbone, all of these different things that you see that are kind of unique to the book of Judges. And they all have a way of pointing to the sovereignty of God, that God is at work, sometimes in unlikely ways, using unlikely things. And that's one of the messages that comes through. It is a book, it has many strong themes in it, but one of the strong themes is about faith. What does it mean to live a life of faith? So this is going to be an exciting series here. Are you excited about studying Judges? Okay, are you excited about studying Judges? Okay, there we go. That's okay, there we go. Now, one of the other unique things about the book of Judges is that in some ways, all of the Old Testament before Judges, leading up to Judges, historically speaking, is leading to this point of Judges. And something's going to transpire in Judges that becomes very important historically, that the rest of the Old Testament prior to it is pointing toward. If you recall, back in the book of Genesis, God starts a faith relationship with Abraham. Remember this? And with this faith relationship, he starts this covenant to be in community with Abraham. It comes with two promises, right? The two promises is there's a people and there'll be a place. People and a place. And the people, of course, are Abraham's descendants. God says to Abraham, your descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars. But there's also a place, and that place is the promised land. It is here in the book of Judges that those two things finally come together for the first time. And it's a long time in coming. There's the entire era of the patriarchs and all of their stories and happenings. Then there are centuries of life in Egypt where they spend most of that time in slavery. Then there's the 40 years in the wilderness. And then there's the era of Joshua, in which they actually move in and have to figure out how to conquer and occupy the land. And then when we come to the book of Judges, they are now a people with a place. And it starts off with this unprecedented opportunity to live as no other people have, to live in a community under the direct sway, desire, and leadership of God himself. Very unique thing here. And with this great opportunity, how do you think they did? Lousy. Yeah, they did lousy. So turn with me, book of Judges, chapter 2. There's a lot of things going on in this book. We don't have time for everything, but there's some great stuff in here. Here's what happens. Look at verse 8, chapter 2, verse 8. It says this, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. So here's the end of that era, now starting this new era, verse 9. And they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Eres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. After that whole generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Now pause there for a moment, because this is really important, because it lays the foundation for the crisis that we are going to see again and again and again. There's going to be a pattern that comes through the book of Judges. And right here in verse 10 of chapter 2 is the foundation for this crisis. And the crisis is, at the end of the era of Joshua, they did not pass on this torch of faith to the next generation. Now, it's important to say that no generation gets to make their faith the next generation's faith. Okay? Every generation must fall in love with God all over again. However, that every generation needs to lay the foundation for the next generation. They need to pass on a torch of faith by which that next generation can take hold of and make it their own. That doesn't happen here. And the failure of that sets up this very long stint, probably 3 centuries of struggling over this issue. You know, one of the, and I'm going to, in this pause, I want to talk a little bit here about this value here at Casas. And then we'll come back and go on and talk about faith here in a moment. But let me say this. For better than 40 years, this has been a value of Casas, to reach back to the next generation. This value goes way past me. It goes past Roger. This is a value we've had. And over that 40 years, we have always worked. We have struggled. We've always said we're going to do a lot to always try and lay that foundation for the next generation. And as you can imagine, that's not always an easy thing to do. To have a service this large that's really designed for multiple generations, to try and figure that out isn't easy. I don't know if you've noticed this, but think about this. Have you ever noticed that people of different ages have different tastes, like in clothing? Yeah, Have you ever noticed that people of different ages have different tastes in music? Yeah, yeah, you bet. So if you come here on a Sunday and let's say you're of maybe a younger group, there will be Sundays where you might say to yourself, the music's a little quiet today, a little subdued, and feels a little on the older side. And if you're of an older group here, there'll be moments where you might say, you know, it seems a little loud today, and the music seems a little too young, okay? And if you're sitting here going, I'm not sure which group I'm in, you're probably in the older group, okay? Just But hey, you're all young at heart, okay? I love that about Cause. You're all young at heart, okay. This is an important value. And as a church, we're not always going to get it right. We're always going to experiment. It's never going to be right for everybody. But what's most important is the value of saying, with great intentionality, we embrace the idea that we will always put our preferences second, to reach back to lay a foundation for the generation that's coming up, that we want to be that kind of community. God blesses that. Okay, so here they are. They've got this faith crisis that goes on, that you see repeated again and again throughout this story. And let's look at how they actually do in this, okay? So we look back here. Where did we end up? Verse 10. So look at verse 11 here. It says this. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord. Now underline, if you've got a pen or a pencil, underline that word forsake or forsook in your Bible. They forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshiped various gods of the peoples around them. They provoked, and this is really interesting, they provoked the Lord to anger. What's going on there? They provoked the Lord to anger. And oftentimes we don't know what to do with passages in the Bible that talk about God getting angry. It's like, is this mean, is God some mean dude that's up there and always looking to go after us? Or do we just kind of, does this not apply? Or what's going on here? Sometimes it feels a little scary that God would get angry. But maybe underline that, because there's something important that I want us to understand here that again, is going to play out through all of this. When you think about God being angry here, two things. The first one is this. The great offense of idol worship is that it is a shortcut around faith. That's what idol worship is about. It is about saying, I do not want to look inward to the growth that God wants to do in my life to grow me up spiritually. What I would rather do is just change the circumstances around me. Idol worship was all about control and manipulation of the things that are hard to control and manipulate. Instead of trusting God in faith with life, they were turning to idol worship, where it was about trying to control the rain. It was trying to control disease. It was trying to get your crops to grow. All those things that matter so much to us that bring happiness or security. What they were trying to say is, I don't want to have to be in a faith relationship and navigate this journey with God that's going to cause me to grow at times when it's hard and painful. What I'd rather do is just have the easy life and just have my circumstances change without me changing. And friends, here's what you have to know about faith. Faith is always about growth. God's not sitting up in heaven and saying, I'm going to make them have to have faith, just for kicks, okay? When God asks us to live with faith, it is about us growing up in our relationship with him. It's about growth, spiritual growth. Now, here's the other thing about what's going on here, this idea of forsaking. In fact, if you look back at the passage, look at verse 13, it says this again. Because they forsook him, underline that again, this is important, because they forsook him and served Baal and the Asheroths. This isn't that they're just worshiping stone and wood. There's something relational going on. They're forsaking God. Sin is fundamentally a relational violation. That's what's happening. They're betraying God. When you get betrayed, and we all do this at one level or another, right? When we do something that hurts, harms, betrays our spouse, our kids, a friend, we get angry, okay? Because it's relational. That's a normal emotion when someone forsakes you. And what's being pointed out here in this passage is God is opened himself up to a genuine relationship with them, a faith relationship. That is precious. But you know what happens in genuine relationships? Sometimes we get hurt, sometimes we get angry, including God, because they have forsook him. So that's what's going on. They're trying to get around this faith thing. We don't want to grow, just change our circumstances. And we're gonna turn to these other gods to get that done. Now, here's what you see though. This amazing quality comes out in God in these moments. Despite the fact that they betray him, that they forsake him, what we see is this, and this is a reoccurring pattern. Throughout the book of Judges, the people are going to turn to the idols. They're going to forsake God again and again and again. And there's this amazing quality of God that comes out again and again and again. He pursues them and seeks to bring them back into a faith relationship where they can grow as people, as individuals, to grow up spiritually. And here's how the pattern works. The people decide, we don't want to live in a faith relationship, that risky stuff of being faithful and changing on the inside. We don't want to do that. We're going to turn to the idols. Then when they turn to the idols, God, in his process of bringing them back, oftentimes brings in a foreign nation, conquers them, subdues them, puts them in bondage. And that's really painful. They don't like that. And in their pain, they cry out to God. And when God sees them crying out and saying, God, we want to trust you again, God raises up a judge or a leader that then delivers them. And this pattern gets repeated again and again and again. It's kind of this weird cycle of going around and around and around. But the great thing about it is that we see a God who never, ever gives up on them. And you know what? God never, ever gives up on us. And we see this kind of cycle in our lives. We see it in our world. In fact, any of you ever work out at a gym? Some of you, a few of you? Okay, yeah. Okay, everyone else, 50 days of fitness. Okay, okay. Now, did you notice something different about your gym this week? Yeah, there was a bunch of extra people in there, wasn't there? Yeah, and some of them were wearing spandex and they shouldn't be. I noticed that right away. That aside, it's a little stray point there. That aside, where was I? Sorry. Spandex. Oh, yeah, okay. I got a story for it. Earlier, I had a really smooth transition from that into this story, but I botched it there with the spandex transition. There's a lady, she buys a year's membership to the gym, and she's got this pattern. She signs up for a year's membership. She meets with the trainer, and she says to the trainer, you know, I do this every year. I sign up for a year's membership. I say I'm going to do this thing, and then by the end of January, it starts to fall off. By the end of February, like I don't do it anymore. And then I go the rest of the year, and I never go to the gym. I get out of shape. But then I make that new resolution at the beginning of the next year, and I sign up for a year's membership, and I start going regularly, and then by the end of January, it's irregular, and then by by the end of February, I'm done again. And she goes, I do this every year, again and again and again. And she says to the trainer, I bet you have a word for that. And he goes, yes, we call it profit. Yeah, we like that. Okay. So there's this cycle that the people go through, and they start doing really good, and then they fall off, and they start doing really good, and they fall off. And we're going to see that through the book of Judges. And in some respects, we see that in our own lives. And the good news is, we have a God who always brings us back, and there's always those opportunities to grow again. One of my favorite stories out of the book of Judges, it's over in chapter 3, if you want to flip over there, is a story of a guy by the name of Ehud. And his story plays out like a story out of Mission Impossible. It's just what he does is unbelievable. But you see this cycle that gets set up right away. Look at this. Let me find it again. Look at chapter 3. Look at verse 12. It says this. And again, here's the cycle. Once again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, here's that foreign invader, comes in, a Moabite, gave Eglon of Moab power over Israel, getting the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him. Eglon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. And this is interesting, the city of palms. Anyone know what city that's also known by? Jericho. And the reason that's significant is because Jericho, early in the tenure of Joshua, that was a city that the people took totally by faith, right? They didn't even attack the city. They just marched around it, and it was just their faith that took the city. The city that symbolized their faith in following God has now been captured, and now it becomes a symbol of their lack of faith. They're not living in faith. They won't trust God. They want to change the outside, not the inside. So he takes the city of palms. Look at verse 15. Again, here's the pattern. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud. And so they get this judge by the name of Ehud. And Ehud, his job now is to drive out the Moabites. But here's the problem Ehud's got in driving out the Moabites. Eglon, the king, he's got an army. Ehud doesn't have an army. Eglon has technology and weaponry. He's got blacksmiths that can forge all of the higher quality steels and make these weapons. Ehud doesn't have that. Eglon has a compound, a palace that's guarded with walls. Ehud doesn't have that. Eglon controls the Jordan River, which was a key defensible point for anything strategic you were going to do in that area. Ehud doesn't have that. Eglon has trained military leaders that can train an army and teach them the skills of warfare. Ehud, he's got like shepherds and farmers, okay? So what's he going to do? So here's his grand plan. His plan is, since I can't conquer him in the normal way, I think if I just kill Eglon, then out of that moment, that fear will rise up and drive him out. But how do you kill Eglon when he's in a fortified palace and you don't have hardly any weaponry? So here's his plan. He forges, and here's this one item that is this kind of unlikely item, okay? They don't have any swords, so he forges one sword that he's going to hide. And so he can't make a full-size sword that you could really fight well with. He's going to make this little bitty sword. They didn't have forging techniques like the Moabites did, so it was probably made of a very low-quality, more brittle kind of metal that, if he got into a sword fight, his sword would break, probably. Okay, that's his problem. But he's going to forge this little sword. It doesn't even have a proper handle. It doesn't have a hilt or anything on it. It's just this sword. He's going to tie it to his leg. This is his grand plan. He's going to tie it to his leg, put it under his kilt or whatever he's wearing. And when they go to take their tribute to Eglon, and a part of being subjected by another kingdom like this is that the vast majority of everything you produce to sustain your life, you had to give away. Your conquering nation would keep you in virtual poverty all of the time. But he's thinking, that's my moment to get inside that compound. So his plan is he's going to come in bringing this tribute with a few guys, and when he gets in the compound, somehow he's going to find a way to get close enough to Eglon to pull out this little rudimentary sword and kill Eglon. and then figure out some plan to get out of there alive, okay? That's all he's got. And it's kind of like mission impossible. And so he's going to do that. So we kind of pick up the story here when this happens. Let me look at verse 18 here. Let me find it. Okay. Here's what it says. Look at chapter 3, verse 18. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way the men who had carried it. So he's got a few men that carry this tribute. Now, I want to pull some application out of this as we kind of tell the story. Look at verse 19. At the idols near Gilgal, he himself turned back. So I want you to picture what's happening here. Eglon's got this, he's got his army in there. He's got bodyguards. He's got servants. Ehud only has a few men with one rudimentary sword. That's all they got. They come in there, and there's this great moment of faith where where Ehud turns loose all the few men that he does have that could help him in this endeavor to try and kill Eglon. He cuts them loose. You guys go on. And what he's doing is he's kind of wooing Eglon and making Eglon feel a little safer here. But what's key here is in this verse. Look at verse 19. At the idols near Gilgal, he turns back. There's this great moment, and twice the author of Judges is going to mention the idols here in this story. And this is important. Here's why. Right in front of the idols is where Ehud turns his men loose. Right in front of the idols is where Ehud says, I'll become most vulnerable to pull out this plan. You understand, these are the idols. I can just picture Ehud saying, looking at those idols, kind of like, Imano, Imano, I got my eyes on you, because here's the deal. To Ehud, these are the idols that have seduced his people away from a faith relationship with God. These are the idols that have pulled his people into bondage. It is their following and worship of these idols that has created the problem. And now it's like Ehud saying, right in front of your face, I'm going to carry these out. You're not gods at all. And what you have done to my people, in this moment, I'm going to live by faith to undo it. It's this great moment here. And here's the point of application that I want to draw out for you on this. A life of faith asks us to face the idols that tempt us. That's true for all of us. There's a part of us that we must face those idols in our life that tempt us. Now, let me say this. We all have those. It's part of the human condition. And most often, sin gets carried out in our lives because we're trying to meet a legitimate need in an illegitimate way. We all have needs for security, for love, for intimacy. Those are good things. We all long for purpose in this life. Those are good things. Oftentimes, the temptation, the idols, are tempting us to meet those needs in unhealthy ways that end up violating our relationships with God, others, or ourselves. That's all sin is. It's a way around looking in ourselves and doing the right thing. It's a shortcut around faith. That's all it is. And we need to face those things to understand them. All too often in the evangelical world, we try to confront sin, and not that this is a bad thing, but in a holistic approach, this is a strategy that will fail you every time, okay? If your only strategy for the temptation in your life is willpower, you will fail. And all too often, I hear Christians talk about, I'm going to try harder. But it's like idols that they pull us deeper. Let me offer something different to you. I think we need to face them. I think there are moments where we need to say, you know what's going on in my life? I have a need for security or purpose or love or intimacy. And I'm trying to meet that through the wrong things. I'm trying to meet needs of security through materialism. I'm trying to meet needs of intimacy through pornography. I'm trying to meet needs of love through manipulation or other things. And if you find yourself struggling with pornography or materialism, or find yourself, I'm always jealous or envious, or I can get a little controlling in the relationships around me, look at those and say, there's a need behind that. And then begin to pray. Say, God, those are like idols in my life. Materialism, pornography, whatever it is. God, help me meet the legitimate need in a legitimate way. Help me have faith in you at how to meet those needs in a way that's honoring to you, others, and myself. And you might find far more power in that approach than you do than just pure willpower to just stop doing it, okay? So here's Ehud. He comes to this moment. And he faces down those idols. And and again, we all have those. I'm running out of time here. Let me move on the story a little bit. So he faces those idols. He goes into the area, and you can picture Eglon. He's got all of his servants around him. And now somehow Ehud's got to get alone with Eglon. And he does this very clever thing. He says to Eglon, I have a secret for you from God. And what he's doing in this moment is he's playing on the pride and the narcissism and all the other dysfunctions of Eglon. Eglon knows that knowledge is power. And here's the secret here. And he doesn't want anyone else to hear this secret because he doesn't know how he wants to use this information. Maybe this is information about his enemies. Maybe this is information about the future. Maybe who knows what this is. And so Ehud says this. And in this moment, Eglon doesn't realize he's being wooed to his death here. He says to his servants, give us a moment here. And probably what happens in this moment is Eglon invites Ehud by himself to go upstairs into kind of a private quarters that Eglon would have had up there. So they go up there by themselves. And the story plays out great. There's some great guy humor in here as there's this moment where they get by themselves, and Ehud pulls out this little rudimentary sword, stabs Eglon right in the stomach, and then pushes the whole sword in, a handle in all, just, like it's a tub of Jell-O or something. And he's all, and it's a great story. If you're a guy, it's a great story. Let me pick it up here. Because there's some guy humor in here that's really good. And since it's in the Bible, we can talk about it. It's great. Look at verse 24. Here's what happens. Because now here's what you have to realize. He's got to have an escape plan, okay? Now that he's killed Eglon, how does he get out of this mess? Here's his escape plan. Look at verse 24. After he had gone, the servants came, look at verse 23. Then Ehud, he's just killed Ehud, verse 23. Then Ehud went out to the porch, shut the doors of the upper room behind him, and locked them. So Eglon is in his private little room there. Ehud closes the doors behind him and is kind of like sneaking out, and he's closed the door. So if anyone goes up to check the doors, it's like Eglon's on the other side with the doors locked. Well, here's why he does this. Look at verse 21. After he had gone, and so now he's making his way out. Hey, guys, how's it going? That Eglon's a funny guy. Yeah, okay. And he's trying to make his way out. Verse 24. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked. And here's what they said. And this is, your guys, you'll love this. Okay. They said he must be relieving himself in the inner room of the house. Okay. So his plan is, I'm going to get them all to think that Ehud is sitting on the John with the Moabite Times or something. He's sitting in there reading for a while, which maybe isn't a stretch. Maybe, I don't know. Anyhow, just, y'all don't find that funny? That's in the Bible. You got to read your Bible, okay? Because there's good stuff in there about that. Okay. See, if you're a boy between the ages of 12 and 16, this is great stuff, okay? Okay, so that's his plan. I'm going to get him to think Eglon's going to the bathroom while I sneak out of here. Now, here's on a little bit serious note here's what this means, okay? Throughout this story, this is not a great plan. There's a really good chance this won't work. And one of the things that is absent in this entire story is this. God never says, Ehud, you'll make it. I promise. This is a story that is absent of God ever saying, this will all work out. God never gives that promise. This could have gone badly. Now, here's the point. Here's the application I want to make on this. A life of faith means risk for the sake of growth. Faith is always about our growth, right? It's about us growing up spiritually, growing up as human beings to become all that God created us to be. Growth comes at risk. Growth oftentimes comes with pain. And oftentimes we want to have the life that is easy and pleasant. That's what I love that life. That's a great life. When I have those moments, I like that life. But you know what I have found over many years of following God? I don't grow much in those moments where life is easy and pleasant. It's in the moments of great risk or of pain that I grow as a person, that I grow spiritually. And if you're going to live a life of faith, you will have to live a life of risk. And God doesn't always promise. Some stories, we love the stories in the Bible where God says to someone, you know what, you trust me and I promise it'll work out. But there's lots of stories in the Bible where God doesn't promise that. There's lots of stories in the Bible where God doesn't promise that and it doesn't work out. I think of John the Baptist, a man of tremendous faith. And there comes a moment where he's sitting in prison. Herod's arrested him, and he is still following Christ in all faith. And he is executed for his faith. I think of Peter, who is an incredible man of faith. We see the growth of his faith. The Peter we see early in the Gospels grows so much as we watch Peter grow throughout the book of Acts. He becomes this incredible, mature believer. And he ends up dying, crucified, probably upside down. I think of David, the guy who kills Goliath. Man, that was a great moment of faith. We celebrate that. There was a great victory in that. God delivered him. But there's a moment in David's life years later where Saul is trying to chase him down, trying to kill him. And David says, I'll trust you, God. I'll live in faith. You don't want me to kill Saul. I won't kill him even if I have the opportunity. And while he's in that time frame, David is off from the village that he's living in. Raiders from another country come and they kill the remaining men. They kill all the boys. They haul all the women and young girls off into captivity. And it didn't work out so well. And he was living by faith. And the reason I say this is not to scare you, but it's to say this. A life of faith involves real risk at times. Because sometimes that's the price of real growth. Sometimes it all works out. Sometimes it doesn't. And there will be moments that God will ask you to live a life of faith, and you will feel the risk of what that means for you. And the great temptation is to take the shortcut out of it, to worship those idols, to meet those needs in other ways, and not to look inward and say, God, how do you want me to grow? How do you want me to grow in my character? How do you want me to grow spiritually? The great temptation will be to try and fix those pains, those risks, by changing the exterior of our lives. Let me give you an example from my life. One of the great idols in my life is parenting. Okay? And if you're a parent, you may realize this yourselves. There's this great temptation as parents, as Christian parents in Christian communities and churches, is to have the image of being a great parent. There's a kind of an overwhelming pressure. And as a pastor, I really feel it's this thing of it just seems good that everyone should think that I'm a good dad. I want that. But here's the deal. Okay? If I parent my children on a day-to-day basis to try and manage that image of you that you have of me, that's a sin. That is not okay. And here's why. Remember, sin is using my freedom of my mind and my body to violate a relationship with God, others, or myself. When I parent my children with the purpose of how it benefits me, that's violating my relationship with them. What they deserve and need from me is for me to say, I will parent them, I will discipline them, I will work with them for what is best for them, no matter what it means for my image. We do this as parents. It can be an idol. We can push our kids in academics. We can push them in sports. We can say, you better behave, when we're over at so-and-so's house, because I don't want them thinking that I don't have control of my kids. And see, so much of that is more about my image than it is what's really best for my kids. And it feels like such great risk. But, right, what we have to understand is sometimes living by faith comes at great risk. And sometimes as a parent, I have to say, I know what my child needs at this moment. And oh my gosh, there's going to be somebody around and they're going to think I'm a horrible parent. And I have to say, I'm not parenting for my image. And that can play out at work. It can play out at work or at school or in your neighborhood. There may be on one side, there are people that you like, I don't want them to know I'm a Christian. They might think ill of me. It might play out bad at work. I might not get promotions. I might not, whatever. And God may say, you know what? I want you to let people know that you're a believer. And God may not promise you that you will get promotions that you deserve or raises that you deserve if you do that. It might end up costing you. It might be the reverse. God may say, you know, you can't defend your morality. If you go out and defend, you know, you've got people around you and they, you know, for whatever reason, you feel like you've got to make sure that they think you're a really moral person. And you may have to risk that. You may have to say, I'm not here to be the prophet or the Holy Spirit in their life. And there may be moments where they don't know my deepest values. And what would that be like? And you might have to say, it doesn't matter. All of us will have those idols in our life that we'll have to stare down, and sometimes they come at us with great risk. Now, here's how I want to close this story out. He successfully makes his way out. You can read the story on your own. Finally, the servants, to great embarrassment, finally bust open the doors because it's been so long. And they discover that he's not sitting on the John reading the Moabite Times. They figure out that he's dead. And you can imagine that that whole palace becomes like a beehive of activity. And the way the story ends is Ehud makes his way out. And there's this great moment. And I'm going to go ahead and just read it to you real quickly here. If I can find it. I can't find it. Here's what happens. Here's what happens. He comes out and he blows this trumpet and calls out to everyone. Eglon's dead. Come out because God has given you your land back. And what's remarkable is this huge tribe of farmers and shepherds with no weaponry at all. They see Ehud running, across the desert toward him. And you can just picture, it's like a scene out of Indiana Jones or something. Remember in the first movie, all the natives are chasing him and he's running for start the plane, start the plane. Remember that scene and the arrows are zipping by? I kind of picture Ehud like that. I killed him, start the plane, And they see this and they realize, this guy had enough faith to go in there by himself and take on the whole army. He killed Eglon. Heck, let's go for it. And here's the application of this. Your faith can have a dramatic effect on other people, on their faith. The people are, when you take that risk to have faith, it may end up inspiring more people than you ever thought possible. And one of the uniquenesses in the Ehud story here is it's really the people that deliver themselves in this story, unlike most of the other stories in Judges. And it's because they were inspired by the faith of Ehud. And I just want to say this, when you step out in faith to really follow God, you can inspire people. You can inspire that younger generation in amazing, amazing ways. Well, we're out of time. Why don't you stand for a closing prayer here? And of course, we have the 10-minute party. If you're new to Casas or visiting, we would love to meet you. We'll be right over there. Let me say a prayer. God, I just pray that as we walk through this amazing book, that we will find truths that are new and fresh, that challenge us to become all that you created us to be. And that what we will find is that you are active in our lives, growing us up to become all that you created us to be. And we pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Have a great Sunday. See you next week.
To the morning, let our hearts beat again with a lifeblood that never fails. breaking down the divide in the holy collision. The divine in disguise took the cross for our sin and shame. Our God, you will never fail. See the lost and returns through the doors ever wide. See the tide as it turns, love and mercy is on the rise. As the world folds into your light, all creation will see your light. So we say, hear the sound of freedom rise as a song breaks the silence, echoing